Everybody, yeah. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the December 4th, 2018 Kennebunkport Growth Planning Committee meeting. Before we get started, we'd like to do some introductions. We'll start down here with Abby.
Abby Sherwin, Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission.
James McMahon.
Jim Fitzgerald.
Barbara Barwise.
Janet Powell.
And Paul Hogan.
Well, thank you all for attending, and we hope you enjoy viewing. Okay, our first item is to approve the minutes of the October 16th, 2018 meeting. Your motion?
Make a motion to approve.
This week's been
Did anyone second?
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, a motion is second. Any input, questions, problems? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, it passes. Okay, I don't see any guests in the audience, and our code enforcement officer isn't with us this evening, not yet anyway. So,
saved you.
item 2, unless somebody has any information about mail or news from other committee representatives, do you have anything?
I don't know.
Okay, let's move on to item 3, and that's Abby Sherwin, the coastal planner for the Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission, and she has a small agenda that we'd like to move through. So, Abby, you got the floor.
Okay, thank you. Before moving on to the survey results, I thought I'd just share some information from the comprehensive plans that I sent out as examples for our last meeting. I reached out to those communities to ask how much they spent on those plans and what the time frame was for development. And I think we'll probably revisit this at a later date, but I just put together a little table noting the costs and the time frames. And I didn't hear back from every community, but I did hear back from a few, and the time frames ranged from 1 year to 3.5 years, and the costs ranged from about $80,000 all the way up to $130,000. So even the examples that looked like they were on the lower end for cost estimates still cost a considerable amount of money, but that money, is spent for all of the community outreach and engagement, and actual drafting of the plan, hiring of consultants, and also the printing of the plan. So just some figures and rough time estimates just to give you guys some information. And Paul, I'll send this out via email as well. So you.
Thanks. I missed the time. Could you just repeat that?
Between 1 year to 3.5 years.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, expensive.
Yes, very.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll certainly put that in the decision-making machine and see what happens. I guess we shouldn't be surprised with that, but that's very expensive to just put a plan together.
I guess I should point out that these costs were all using consultants to conduct most of the work. So I think that's where a large portion of the budget is allocated to. So if nobody has questions on that, we can move right into survey results. So we decided to close the survey on November 20th after discussing it with Werner and Dan, just because that's the date that we had agreed upon in previous meetings, and so they wanted to stick with that closing date. So we did close it. There were 488 responses in total. 424 of those were online responses. 64 of those were paper responses. And so that translates to roughly a 14% response rate community-wide based on the 2017 population of the town. which is not as high as your response rate for the 2001 survey, but it is still a fairly good response rate for this type of survey. So just to give you an idea that usually for these community surveys, a 10% return rate is considered adequate and good. Let's see, just
How many,
for
what was the mail-in again? How many mailed in?
there were 64 paper copy responses, and 424 online
Okay,
responses.
that's high for
So-
online.
Yep, yep. And so for some surrounding communities, just to give you an idea of surveys that they've done, in Portland, they did a survey in 2015, and they got a 7% response rate. Wells did one in 2016 and got a 10.2 response rate. Kennebunk did one in 2017, got a 7.2 response rate, and Agunquit also did one in 2017 and got a 19.5 response rate. So that 14% response rate here in Kennebunkport is not anything bad. You know, it's pretty good.
Yes, I would say that's quite good.
Abby, do you know, from talking with Werner, what his response rate was on the short-term rental survey, which I guess is probably back by now? And that was mailed to everybody?
Yeah, I do not know. I know when I picked up the hard copies of the community survey responses, he said that he had gotten a lot back, but I don't know the exact number. But I know that that survey was sent out to a select group of individuals, targeted randomly, I think. I don't want to misspeak, but it wasn't distributed community-wide. That was my understanding of that survey.
No, I think it went, my understanding was it was mailed to every taxpayer.
Yeah, we're taught to every taxpayer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Just a
Because I
paper
didn't get one
copy of.
first time.
yep.
I didn't get it first time, and I asked, and that's what I was told.
Okay. So yeah, I'm not sure what he's gotten back in terms of number of responses yet for that. So the survey results, I entered all of the responses that were submitted via hard copy into SurveyMonkey. So the graphs and tables of data that are presented in this document include both the online responses as well as the hard copy responses. And so I don't know if folks want to go through question by question and discuss the results, or just pick out a few that seem important, more important than others, I should say. They're all important.
I think they're all important.
I have to refresh myself on some.
But I found that it was interesting. Natural resources still was going away with the answers. Yeah.
You mean off the charts?
Yeah.
So those first three questions are really just to gauge sort of the demographic information about the folks who are responding. And I will point out that if we want to take a look at the responses broken down by where folks live in the community, or how long they've been in the community, or what relationship they have with the community, we can do that. We can sort of call out the responses based on individual responses. So that's an opportunity to do that, but this is just sort of a summary of all the responses lumped together.
I thought one very interesting thing was, as someone from Goose Rocks, that the largest area that responded was Goose Rock. 31%
Yeah, 30,
of
almost
the-
30%, that's a lot.
Yeah.
was from Goose Rocks, and yet there almost 75% of the people who responded were year-round. There were very few seasonal people.
Yep.
I like the
And
three
I
that don't know
know-
where they live.
Does that breakdown of respondents for question 3, does that sort of reflect the populations within each of those areas, or are there areas that are sort of overrepresented here based on responses in comparison to their population?
I would
say-
assume Goose Rocks
Goose
is
Rocks.
overrepresented.
Yeah.
That looks pretty adequate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I would just say, we promoted it in 2 different ways to people at Goose Rock's mailing list that they get. So the same thing may not have happened elsewhere in the town, except for David James's, group did a
KRA.
email to people who
Yeah.
belong. So that could account for why Goose Rock's is overrepresented, I
Yeah.
would say.
Okay. Okay. And then questions 4 and 5, it looks like most people are staying engaged with goings on in the town, through some means. Moving on to question 6, looking at important town characteristics, low crime rate, attractiveness of the town, and access to the coast and recreational and cultural opportunities all were rated as being very important. Interestingly, I think is the least important factor that we identified here, based on responses, was that proximity to employment was not all that important.
That's because we're old.
Nobody's working.
There you go. We're all retired.
Well, it's a short commute.
It is.
That's true. The bedroom to the living room.
Bedroom to the kitchen.
But none of the other categories were identified really as being not important. So. And then I think we already touched on this, but question 7, looking at what the issues of greatest concern are for respondents, natural resources and the environment
Yep.
certainly
Amazing.
rose to the top as being the priority. Other important factors are housing for young families,
That's good.
traffic and parking. Also affordable housing is sort of lumped in there. Those are all sort of fall within close ranges of each other.
But if you combine the 3 that relate to housing, it's as important as the natural resources.
Yeah, that would.
When you add-
yeah.
Yeah.
And short-term rentals were, got the highest number of ratings of not at all important out of all of those, but there are
that's
other
good.
questions
That's
that,
amazing.
there are other questions that relate to short-term rentals in this survey that would suggest that they are important for
Maybe
the
we don't
people
have a
to
problem.
address.
They're important to a small group of people.
Yes.
And then question 8, which asks people to rank these identified issues or topics according to what they thought the town's priorities should be, with 1 being the top priority and 7 being the lowest priority. Again, preservation of natural resources and the environment rose to the top, followed by housing for young families, traffic, parking, affordable housing. Those were all sort of within the same general area. I will say that there were quite a few paper copies of the surveys where respondents did not assign 1 rank to each topic area. So they would assigned the top priority to 3 different topic areas. People weren't allowed to do that in the online survey, the way the question was set up, and I think, just reading the question, I can see how somebody would get a little confused or not know that they could only, they had to use all numbers 1 through 7,
Yeah.
that they couldn't use them multiple times. So I don't know how we want to deal with that. If what I did when I was manually entering the data from the paper copies into SurveyMonkey was, if there was one topic that had 1 ranking, so if 2 topics were ranked as number 3, but only 1 topic was ranked as number 4, I wrote down that number 4 for that topic, and I left the others blank.
Yeah.
It was much more difficult. It was much more difficult to do sitting at that desk that day, election day. It was very difficult to for people to do it by paper. It was much more confusing than doing it online. we had to guide people through it.
So what I can do is I can go into the SurveyMonkey data in Excel and add all the additional responses. But what that will do is that if somebody did assign a ranking of 4 to 3 different topic areas, they would, be skewed a little bit and weighted slightly differently. But that would capture all of the responses.
How many are we talking about?
64, you say?
No,
No,
there are
just a-
probably about 10
Probably,
surveys that,
can't
probably
take
won't
the
skew it
average of
that
them?
much.
I wouldn't,
Is there a way to
I
take the
wouldn't even
average?
bother.
I
mean,
wouldn't bother.
As long as we have good data here, I wouldn't bother.
Yeah.
okay. No, not really a way to
You
take
can't
the
really take
average
the average
because,
if they mark 3 of them.
They'd be great at ranked choice voting.
well, I could just go in and add, like, if they ranked, the last 3 all being 3s.
Yeah.
I could assign 3s to each of
Oh,
those,
yeah.
but there's no way to take the average of that. But honestly, I think that, based on the total number of responses that we received and just the number of surveys that had that issue,
Yeah.
it wouldn't,
Yeah,
it wouldn't
out of
make a
10,
difference.
10's not a big number.
I would say it
For
looks,
one
it
question.
looks fairly equal in importance,
Yeah.
all the issues that are there, except for that,
Short
the
term.
short-term rentals.
Okay.
Well, but if you look at the number ones, the natural resources is way out ahead.
Yeah.
Even though, when you look at the bar chart below it, tell me what that represents. Like the preservation of natural resources, the yellow line.
6.
What is that?
6.
What is
6
that?
and
the
2 and a
total?
2 and a 5
No,
8.
it's the score over here on the chart. Score is 593 for the yellow one.
5.93.
Or 5.93.
So that's
Right.
close to 6, right?
So that's why it's the way it is.
It's almost.
And they're
double
weighted
as-
then. These scores are weighted,
Yes.
depending
yeah.
on whether you put your first vote in
Got it. Okay,
number
I see it.
5 or 4 or
It's
3.
doubled.
So number 9, generally, people seem to think that the amount of taxes that they're paying is a good amount for what they're getting. Question 10, about whether or not growth should be concentrated in areas with public water and sewer adjacent to village areas. Folks didn't really have a strong opinion on that one way or the other. Most either agreed or neither agreed nor disagreed, with a higher tendency toward agreeing with that. And then this is the first question in the new survey that was a repeat or a closely worded version of a question that appeared in the 2001 survey. So that's what these small little tables are in dark gray outline. That indicates that that question is from the 2001 survey, and those numbers within that table are the responses received from the 2001 survey, so that we could compare. It seems to follow a similar pattern, this survey, as well as the 2001 survey for this specific question. More
Although
people
it looks
did
like it was-
strongly agree that this should be the case. Question 11, similar, just most folks agreed that the preferable land use pattern was higher density near and adjacent to villages and lower density in rural areas. And again, that follows closely to the results of the 2001 survey. Question 12 was related to the growth management ordinance. And folks generally thought that that's something that should continue. There were a few comments in the open-ended sections about the growth management ordinance, but there's the overwhelming majority of people did either agree or strongly agree that that should be continued. Again, affordable housing. Most folks agree now, as they did in 2001, that there is a lack of affordable housing in Kennebunkport. And that is a topic that came up repeatedly in the open-ended questions, as well as something that people would want to change about the community, as they would like to have more affordable housing and more housing geared toward young families and middle-class families.
They're being heard.
Question 14, it's important for the town to have housing geared towards seniors. Folks generally agreed with that statement. There were more that neither agreed nor disagreed than the previous question, but that's something that sort of most people were in support of. Question 15. The town should require developers to construct affordable housing or be required to pay an in lieu fee to support construction of affordable housing. That was fairly evenly distributed, with a slightly more people agreeing that that should be the case. I don't know if any of these results are surprising to anyone or.
How do you interpret the, 25% of the people said neither agree nor disagree. They didn't want to take a position. So if you were making policy, what do you do with that?
That's a good question. I don't know what you do with that. I mean, that could suggest that people either
Need more
aren't fully
information?
aware of what this question is asking
Yeah.
specifically,
I
and
think-
would need more
Yeah.
information.
That's what it sounds like to
Or
me.
that they just maybe, it wouldn't impact them, so they really don't have an opinion one way or the other.
Yeah.
But I think that the fact that more people are responding that they do agree that that should be the case than do not agree that that should be the case, gives you some useful information.
Yeah.
Generally, people did not think that the town should seek to diversify the tax base by encouraging more commercial and industrial growth. And this sort of shifts somewhat the responses that were received from the 2001 survey. The majority of folks in that survey did strongly disagree that that should happen, but there were much more people who agreed or strongly agreed that it should. I think it was more split between responses, where, as in this current survey, the responses are really geared toward being in disagreement of this statement. And so I don't know if that's a reflection of the fact that the town has encouraged commercial and industrial growth since the 2001 survey was conducted, and now the town has sort of reached its capacity for that, or if that's a reflection of some other opinion in the town. Question 17 about encouraging a broad mix of diversity of housing types. People generally agreed and strongly agreed that that should be the case. And that aligns fairly well with the 2001 survey results also. Question 18, people generally agree that impact fees on new development should be instituted to help pay for public infrastructure. Again, that also reflects what was the general sentiment during the 2001 survey. That goes with user fees as well, continuing user fees.
I'd be curious to know what an impact fee is.
So an impact fee is something that, right now, folks would pay an impact fee likely for the school system. So, to fund certain programs or projects or services that the town provides. each new development has to pay a fee toward that. So there's generally, in most towns, there's an impact fee for schools.
It's also
you can
one for sewer. So
No, no,
if
that's what I mean. I was kind of thinking that's,
So
you know,
any-
you pay a
anytime-
hookup for, you know, sewer or something like that, but, you know.
well, anytime you're gonna impact the services of the town in some way.
Thought that's what
usually-
taxes were for.
Usually to make it better for,
Thought that's what
Everyone.
taxes were for.
right, well, now you know.
Impact fees are, they they
Yeah.
take a set amount of money or set percentage of money and allocate it to a very specific service or infrastructure component or something like that. So it's just a little more targeted in what the money is going
A little
toward.
bit.
Let's see. The town should work to more actively support small home-based businesses and home occupations in town. Most people agreed with that statement. There were a large number that neither agreed nor disagreed, and that follows very closely the distribution of responses for the 2001 survey.
Which
So not
number is
much
that?
change there. That's
20.
number 20
Oh, way back.
on page 8.
Oh, yeah, there we
Skipping
go,
ahead,
yeah.
are you?
No.
21, preserving a high-quality elementary school was very important, as it was in 2001.
Love that answer.
There was fairly strong agreement that the town should work to explore regional transportation alternatives during high-traffic months. And that also, again, follows closely the results of the 2001 survey, which I think is fairly consistent throughout the questions that were repeats from the 2001 survey.
Yeah,
Is
they
that
are,
folks
they're right.
generally maintained
Yep.
their opinions on that. Bikeways, trails, and pedestrian paths were all mentioned repeatedly in the open-ended questions as being things that people wanted to see more of or improved or expanded in the town. And they're also, just from this question, you can see there's very strong support for the town investing and continue to maintain those things, and that also follows closely with the results from the 2001 survey. Sidewalks, the same thing. Constructing new sidewalks and improving existing sidewalks was very important. Same with supporting and preserving the fishing, lobstering, and shellfishing industries within the town. And again, follows closely to the results of the 2001 survey. Getting back to the natural environment, question 26, the town should play a more active role in protecting sensitive environmental areas. Most folks either agreed or strongly agreed with that statement. There were a few comments in the, with the paper copies that were submitted. Some of them included handwritten comments with each of these questions, and there were a few that noted that the Kennebunkport Land Trust was doing a really great job at protecting environmental areas. Question 27, would folks be willing to support a land acquisition program to purchase environmentally sensitive areas and areas that provided access to water bodies? Generally, people were in agreement that that was a good thing, a good idea. And again, that follows closely with the results of the 2001 survey. There were more, I would say in 2001, a lot more people strongly disagreeing that the town should do that than there were with this most recent survey. But folks who agreed and strongly agreed were definitely in the majority for that question. Question 28, important open space and natural areas have been lost to development. A pretty even spread between strongly agreeing, agreeing, and neither disagreeing nor disagreeing. And that follows, again, sort of the
Again,
same
yeah.
distribution as the '01 survey. Strongly.
I wouldn't say that was balanced. You only have 70 people who disagreed or strongly disagreed, whereas you had 264 who agreed, strongly agreed. So over half.
But if
felt
you look at the
strongly.
total number of respondents for the '01 survey
It's
of
twice.
861, it's,
Double almost, or
Almost
not quite,
double.
yeah.
of what the number of respondents for the
Yeah.
2018 survey. So the general distribution, rather, is about the same. But there were many more people who took the 2001 survey than there were
Right.
this survey.
And I would have thought, because of all the land the trust has saved from development, that there would be more than 70 people who felt, that would disagree or strongly disagree because of not what the town has done particularly, but what the trust has done.
And I guess I will point out that in the open-ended questions, when the question that asked what folks would change about the town, there were a lot of comments having to do with the rate of growth and the amount of development that's occurring within the town, and the general sentiment that that is negatively impacting the town. So this question might be a reflection more on the amount of development and the perceptions about that development, and less so on the concept that that development is occurring in important natural areas. So I think you have to look at, when we're looking at these results, we have to sort of look at them as a whole and not just individually, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because they still agreed that, the number of, I guess, permits, whatever, I don't know what question that was. They strongly agreed that limiting the number of the growth management ordinance, managing the number of new dwelling units, strongly disagreed. I'm sorry, strongly agreed. So,
Right.
I mean, that does go in line with probably the same perception as this.
Yep, so this might, be a reflection that people generally think maybe there's too much development occurring in the
Yeah.
town.
Buy it if you don't want to see a house there.
Question 29, the town is doing an adequate job of protecting its wetlands, waterways, and other areas of environmental significance. People generally agreed with that, as they did when the 2001 survey was administered. Some of the written comments that were received for this question asked what the town was doing. People were unaware about what the town was doing, so that might be an opportunity for education and outreach, or at least more information about the town's activities on that front. Folks were generally in agreement or didn't really have an opinion about whether or not the town should provide resident access to the water for small recreational watercraft. But as when we dig into the open-ended questions, one thing that folks commonly cited as being something they would change about the town was that the town should provide water access. And that sort of follows pretty closely with the results of the 2001 survey as well. Question 31, the town should play a more active role in regulating short-term rentals. Responses were pretty evenly distributed across the 5 possible answers, with slightly more people agreeing or strongly agreeing than disagreeing or strongly disagreeing that short-term rentals should be regulated by the town. But neither, the same amount of people either agreed or neither agreed nor disagreed that that should be done. So hopefully the survey that Werner sent out will provide some more information on that front.
Well, it's interesting when you ask a direct question, you get this result, and when you ask what's important, it comes in last.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And yet when you ask the question, should you regulate, they say yes.
Yeah. Yes. So I think that probably gives you all an idea that the issues that you think are important, that you chose to include in the survey in those earlier questions, for respondents to rank as priorities and what the most important topics were, are all generally important to the community. It's just a matter of how important they are in relation to each other. And there were also a number of open-ended responses that related to short-term rentals, both for and against the regulation of them. Question 32, the town should plan for local impacts of sea level rise and a changing climate. There was overwhelming agreement that that's something that the town should indeed undertake. Same with question 33, with the town should work to reduce energy consumption of town-owned facilities. And also question 34, the town should develop a sustainability plan. So I don't know if those are surprising results to anyone or if they're expected. Question 35 was the one that asked folks whether or not they thought that the traditional character of the following areas of town, those identified in the table there, were negatively changing. And so along with the name of the area of the town, we provided the description as written in the comprehensive plan, the existing comprehensive plan. And so this is the breakdown of responses. I think it's much easier to visualize in the graph than it is the table. But overall, I think Goose Rocks sort of won out as the neighborhood that was most negatively changing in relation to its description in the comprehensive plan, followed by Dock Square and the riverfront area. Also the rural area. And then in the other category, that was just room for, or space for folks to identify other areas of town that they wanted to comment on. But those comments largely consisted of people expanding on their ratings of these listed areas. If that makes sense. And so all of those comments that were received in that other category are listed on the next few pages. And so I went through those and sort of summarized what the key themes were that arose repeatedly. And generally it was that there was too much development and growth throughout the town. Large houses that were being constructed were not in keeping with the community and neighborhood character. There were areas of town that were overcrowded. Some people did say that the change that they've seen has been positive and a good thing. And then there were also a number of comments that noted that the descriptions of each of the areas were inaccurate based on what is in place now, which I thought was interesting because those descriptions did come straight from the comprehensive plan. So that suggests that the comprehensive plan's idea of what these areas consist of is not really an accurate reflection of what's there now. So I don't know if this,
No, it's good information.
if anybody sees, if anything in this response sort of sticks out to anybody.
Well, we wrestled with that a bit when we, should we use those definitions or should we change them? Because they did seem inaccurate when we were discussing them, but we decided to keep them there because we wanted to have, be able to compare apples to apples.
There's some good information in here, for sure.
Should slow the speed limit down on one of these comments. The town should address dangerously narrow roads with granite outcroppings.
So,
Maybe
And
they go-
antique lighting.
Maybe they're going too fast.
question 36 and question 37 were both open-ended, and there are quite a few pages of responses for those, but I went through them and I picked out the ones that repeatedly came up, or had a common theme to them, so I pulled those out, so I'll just go through each of those. But for question 36, what is the one thing you would change about Kennebunkport? A lot of folks noted that they wanted a boat launch, water access, and/or town beach. And it was noted that in several responses that Goose Rocks Beach was not really usable because there's never any parking and that it's overcrowded. There were a lot of responses that had to do with the tour buses in town, and that there were too many tour buses and that they were in areas where the roads really couldn't support the length of a tour bus. I don't know anything about that, but that came up repeatedly.
Like cross street.
Granite outcroppings.
Also about a lot of comments about development, and just the overwhelming majority of those comments suggested that there was too much development occurring, that it was too expensive, and that it was turning Kennebunkport into a resort-style community, which was not desired. Parking was a really big issue. The number of tourists and the community's focus on tourism was noted as being problematic, and that the focus should be on residents and people who live here year-round, not on bringing more tourists in the summertime. There's a need for more affordable housing that's geared toward not only young families, but also middle-class individuals. Traffic and speeding were cited multiple times, and the need to enforce existing speed limits. Maintaining traditional character was something that came up several times as being an important thing that the town should undertake. The need for better and more sidewalks in certain areas of town, which we can go through the comments if you'd like to figure out what those areas are, but that was sort of something that came up repeatedly. There were a lot of comments having to do with short-term rentals, both for and against regulating short-term rentals. A lack of diversity in the community was noted as being problematic or undesirable. The need for bike lanes and public restrooms. The need for more parks and open space for people to use for recreation purposes. A loss of natural areas was of concern, and the need to attract more young families was also noted as being important. And those are sort of the primary themes that came up in those comments. And again, these were just the ones that sort of had repeat responses. And then for question 37, I did the same thing. What do you enjoy most about living in Kennebunkport? The people, the small town, quiet New England charm and the community character. The ocean, natural beauty and natural resources, strong sense of community, beach access, the safety of the community, the location of the town, and also the downtown culture were all really noted as being important and what folks enjoyed about living in the town.
Very good.
So any questions about any of that? It is a lot of information.
Yeah, there is.
And
But
so
not
this
many
is,
changes.
no, surprisingly, pretty consistent with the
Okay.
results
Yeah.
of the 2001
Of
survey.
all the questions that we repeated, what was the one that really showed the most difference?
I think, let's see.
If we have that.
Yeah, I mean, they were all pretty consistent. The only one,
I didn't see any.
You could write a novel about some of this stuff.
Yes.
I think oh, right, the town should seek to diversify the tax base by encouraging more commercial and industrial growth. Question 16
Okay.
of this most recent
Yeah.
survey. That was the one that was the most different. It sort of had a flip-flop in responses from people strongly disagreeing, or rather, people agreeing to more people disagreeing that the town should do that
Now,
now. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
well, that's understandable.
Yeah. More people.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
So,
Abby, this is incredible. A lot of really excellent information here that we can work with.
so I would be interested to know what format would be most useful for you all to have this information in so that it was more usable. The 2001 survey, I think the responses were slightly easier to compile into a neat little table because almost all of the questions were asked in the same manner, and that they were all asked with the ranking of either strongly disagree to strongly agree. And so those allow for the presentation of the results in something like this. Whereas the questions in this most recent survey were a little more dynamic, I guess I should say, in that they were presented in different formats and asked in different ways. So comparison across the questions is not quite as easy.
Yeah. Well, I think what we'll do is we'll see if Dan wants to chime in on that,
Okay,
because I think he's got that history
okay,
behind him,
yeah,
as you, and
okay,
we'll see if we can help you understand just the most valuable way to display the information.
okay.
And
And
we
then,
might align it more to the comprehensive plan too, so, you know, we just pull those questions that hit a certain area of the comprehensive plan, and at least get them that way.
Right.
And then within that, whatever works best to help define
okay.
where we should be heading.
Okay. Another question has to do with those two open-ended questions. One way to sort of quantify the results, so they're less qualitative, is to go through and identify those key themes that are sort of repeated throughout the comments. Like the themes that I just went through, and that was just
Yep.
from an initial
Yeah.
read. And then sort of tally up the number of comments that relate to those themes. That's one way that we could make this data more manageable.
Like boat access or something like that.
Right, pick a topic
could-
or a theme. and
Right, and then you could actually search all the
Yeah.
ones that they had a comment about, yes, we want more boat access.
Right. So if that's something that you would like done, we can do that.
Yeah, that, I think that would be valuable
Yeah.
too. That's almost like another question.
Probably more
Yeah.
manageable.
Yeah.
if you do it that way.
Okay. Are there certain themes or topics that you would like identified for that sort of
Well,
parsing out
we're in the
of
midst, we're in the midst
responses
of, you know, housing.
Mm-hmm.
So probably anything to do with housing. And then, and rentals, we're looking at rentals, and seniors, I think we're,
Okay, so sort of in line with the
with
main
what,
topic
you know, what the
areas
town is
of
actually
other-
talking about
Yep.
now. For now, anyway,
Yep.
this data can be used in many different ways over time. So
Where
It's
that
it's an excellent resource for understanding what's going on.
It might be important to, you know, the biggest question, the natural resources, you know, pull some data.
Yeah, that's a separate area.
Yeah,
Yeah, we haven't even really touched on that, really, not when you come right down to it. So, there might be a whole nother area that we have to concentrate on.
And also, I mentioned that some folks who submitted hard copies of surveys wrote comments in the margins of some of the questions.
Oh, interesting.
Actually, quite a few people did. One person submitted 6 pages of typed comments along with their survey. So what I did is I put those comments in a table and noted the question that the comment applied to. But and I didn't hand these out because my concern is that folks who took the online version of the survey did not have an opportunity to provide comment for each of the questions by design, because we didn't want a slew of open-ended responses to sort
Right.
through. So I don't know how you all want to handle this. I can incorporate these responses into the 2 open-ended questions of the survey. Again, that's giving an opportunity to people who completed the paper surveys and wrote down their comments. An opportunity that was not given to the folks who did the survey online. So we can
I
sort
mean, I
of,
think that's fair to put it, I mean, I'm just reviewing this.
yeah,
I don't think it's gonna hurt to put whatever comments there are in this,
okay,
in my opinion.
to other folks
I
feel.
can agree with
I
that.
agree.
Yeah,
Okay, all right, so that's what I'll do then.
yeah. Good.
Okay. Abby, incredible piece of work.
Very nice.
Thank you very much for all your effort. And analysis, I mean, just preparing for this tonight, had to, you probably spent many sleepless nights.
I spent some time in the office.
What does this mean? What does this mean?
Okay,
Excellent, though, just excellent.
Yeah.
thank you.
I'm glad we had a successful survey, too, because that really helps us with our comprehensive planning.
Yeah, and I know there was concern about the response, the number of responses that were received, but I do think that it's, you know, a respectable response rate.
It's a respectable rate, and it
Something to build
really
on.
mirrors exactly what the '01 survey
Yep, the
did, so
distribution of responses
even
certainly
more
does.
emphatic that most of the
I'm going
ideas
to-
that are in here and the results really indicate what the town really wants.
Yeah, I would just say, at the next meeting, we should find out how many did the short-term rental survey when it was mailed out to everybody. To me, this is a more significant piece of information gathering than the other, with, you know, much longer term and much broader scope of questions. So if it turns out they got 1,000 back or 2,000 back, I want to revisit opening it up to people in some way, because
Agreed.
this is half the number that completed it a decade ago when there was no technology. So our assumptions that people would just go online and do it turned out not to be.
Well, in 2000, what was the response rate back then? I mean,
We had
got
900, almost 1,000.
I don't know what the percentage.
Yeah, that's what I was curious,
I'm-
what it
yeah,
was
trying to
10
see
years
if
ago.
there's a response rate.
I mean, the population of the
I don't know
town
what
is
the
probably
population
down,
was.
Yeah,
No.
yeah.
You'd have to know the population.
but it hasn't halved.
Paul, did you say you know what the population was in 2001?
No, I don't,
Okay.
but I'm sure it did not go to half of what it was.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
To merit a 50%, you know, a decrease of, you know, in half. We have 488 versus 900,000.
Yeah, and I don't know how this
Really?
survey was administered either,
The,
the 2001 survey, because the number of responses for each question is pretty varied. Like, it ranges from
Yeah,
almost,
interesting.
over 900 to 700 responses based on the question, so.
No.
You think
It's
they
certainly
skipped
all done
some?
by paper.
Yeah, I
Maybe
don't
they
know
skipped
where-
those questions?
Yeah,
I don't
yeah, I'm
remember.
not sure.
I agree with Paul. It'd be nice to get more responses so we can
Absolutely.
steer it. Steer certain questions.
But if it turns out nobody filled out the one in the mail, then we'll know.
Yeah.
But that wasn't a better route either.
The other thing I noticed when we were in here earlier is that the notice or announcement is still airing on the cable access channel for the survey. So I will work with Werner to get that taken down.
Right.
Are there any other?
I can pull that.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any other forms of advertisement for the survey that are still out there?
Only if it's on the website.
Okay. Sorry, what were you saying, Jim?
No, I was gonna piggyback. I can wait till other business on
Okay.
a issue.
Okay, does that wrap it up?
Yes.
Take a deep breath.
Yep.
In the next steps, which is under this topic,
Yep.
I would think it would be an important part of the educational process to lay the groundwork for revision to the comprehensive plan to go to, for example, the Conservation Committee, the Board of Selectmen, and give these results now. Don't wait 3 years or 4 years. There's a lot of policy that's going to be made or not made while the wordsmithers are wordsmithing. So I would think, just like the short-term rental committee is going to give a report on their survey, it would be very appropriate, I think, to go to the Board of Selectmen, the Conservation Committee. It could be in writing, it could be, oral. Maybe you don't need to send a representative to the Conservation Commission, but there are a lot of issues in here that would impact their work, just like
Sure.
the short-term rental committee. And maybe there are other committees people would think about in town. But I just don't think this should be forgotten, by February that it was done. And there was a big article in the local paper on a similar effort in Kennebunk, and on their comprehensive plan. So I think it's part and parcel of education to say, this happened, this is step one, and where do we go from here?
Now, the way it stands now, we're the only people that have seen the results of this, or besides town management?
Yes. Yep.
And everybody watching.
Okay.
I want to give those back to Abby.
Thank you.
All right, well, again, let's see what, have Dan chime in on that and see if,
I'll send him an email on that in case
Okay.
he's not watched.
yeah, good. Very good. Well, thanks again, Abby, you did a marvelous job
Thank you.
making this all work. And next time we do a survey, we'll make sure that we line it up with the voting process, so we can stand out there and tell people to make sure they do the survey, because I think our numbers would be a lot less if we hadn't done that.
Yeah, there was a significant jump in responses the day of and the day after the election.
Good. That's
Plenty of
good.
people.
Okay, other business.
We should probably get a reminder to whoever manages the website or the calendars, just to make sure we update that. Thought we had a meeting, I think last week or the week before, and I realized I couldn't make it because of the snowstorm, but it's posted on the website that we actually did have a meeting, so Paul corrected me. Thank you, Paul. So, but
No charge.
we should probably, make sure we're doing our due diligence to update that, because I'm one person. If other people showed up, it's
Well-
not fair to the public.
Well, one thing we're gonna do, right after other business is schedule our next meeting, so.
Yes.
And I think what James is suggesting, when we do this and we decide not to have 2 meetings in a month, that we then cancel the second one, which is held on the calendar for for reserving the room.
Yeah.
Right.
So it always is there. It needs to be pulled down after
Yeah.
we make our decision.
Okay,
I have another item of new business. It's not new business, and I thought we were going to do it tonight, but I hope that we put it as an important agenda item at our next meeting, and that is we agreed we had a need to review the allocation of the permits, the growth permits, and that we needed to have a process for the ordinance. There's 2 parts to it. The regular looking at the map that we're supposed to do, and a process for that, which we don't have any policy or process other than what the ordinance tells us to do. And the second is, especially in light of these survey results, the kind of suggestion that I made when we were reviewing Pinnacle Hill 2, that it was important not to just allocate permits to people with sewer, because that in effect was having a negative effect potentially of limiting other housing in town because they didn't have that access. And the survey results for me confirm a couple of things. A, people are very concerned about the environment, so whatever we do has to be environmentally responsible. B, people are not so focused on where the housing is. People did not seem to have that strong bias that it should be focused toward the center of town, toward those areas that had sewer. That didn't seem to be shared, widely. So I had made various suggestions about how you would review and grant somebody a growth permit, even though he wasn't in a sewer situation. And so I thought we had agreed we were going to look at that and see what we could do, whether it was something that we had discretion to do as a board or something that required an ordinance change, but that we look at that issue and wrestle with it and see what we come up with.
okay, you hear you, I'll
And-
pass that along.
And that, I know that that's something that was discussed at our last meeting as being a possible agenda item for this meeting, and the decision was made to table it until the next meeting because Werner couldn't be here
Werner,
tonight,
right.
so.
Werner's not here and Dan isn't here, so I think it's prudent that both those people be here.
Yep, absolutely.
But it's well noted. Thank you. Any other business? Okay, let's discuss next meeting. I don't have my calendar with me, so let me get an idea of what we're talking about.
Well, we normally meet on the first Tuesday of the month, and that will be New Year's, and that will be a lot of fun.
All right, that'll be a
Oh,
lot of
wow.
fun.
There you
You,
go.
you bring the,
I'll bring the mag.
The bag, yeah. I'll bring the glasses.
All right, so I don't think we'll be meeting on the first?
Probably not that one. no.
Okay.
I'll be wearing a lampshade if you want to go.
Well, that'll help us all find our way.
So Werner,
I'll be lit up, but I won't.
Werner recommended January 15th, but Dan, I think, I'm not sure the whole group was CC'd on this email, but Dan said that he's going to be traveling for work on the 15th, so he won't be able to make that date, but he also can't assure that he will be able to make other dates in January.
That's right.
So, said that the group should go with whatever works best for
Yeah.
the most people.
Is Warner, what's the Warner's availability if Paul wants to, if we put his, what he wants on the agenda?
He did not say that he was unavailable for any of the days,
Yeah.
except the January 1st.
I would,
So.
yeah.
So, yeah.
I would suggest that we go with the 15th.
I would say yes, let's do the 15th.
And Dan's plans, who knows, might change in the meantime.
You never know, right?
Yeah. Because he thought he was going to be available here, so you never know.
Okay. Oh, I wanted to, one other mention, thank you for doing the minutes.
Oh,
I forgot to
Oh.
mention it.
you're welcome. It's so much fun.
Okay, any other items? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. The meeting
Good night,
is
all.
concluded. Thank you, and good night,
Night,
everyone.
Paul.